It is Mrs. Johnson with the Agro Wisdom Channel, and we are talking about Amaranthaceae. Uh, so, and this is kind of really nerdy stuff, but my last semester at Chico State, I got into collecting botanical specimens through a class with the Ahart Barium. And it was so lovely, and I nerded out, and it was like a biology class and not like the ag class, because the ag class was like weed identification, and this one was like plants in general. And I was like, I want to take the plants in general one because I don't want to learn how to like ID weeds. And it was harder. Like there was more stuff to do in it, like bigger projects to do in it compared to the other class that my like friends and classmates took. But I really enjoyed it a lot more than they did. They didn't like their experience in that class. It was really boring. And it was really hard to tell the difference between weeds because they weren't like accurately collecting them. But anyway, I should make video on botanical specimens because I think they're really cool. Um, anyway, let's talk about Amaranthaceae, which is a botanical family behind Spinaceae, Leraceae. Now I'm really bad at Latin, so excuse me butchering it. Now, ta-da! So we're going to go from, let me go back here. We're going to go from the bottom of the plant family and its widest, biggest group of relatives to the very, very smallest. So what does that look like? So in comparison, we're going, because I haven't really talked about like how kingdoms and stuff work. Um, I used a tree because it's kind of like a family tree. So like this down here is the stuff that's like widespread and important and super old. So like uh and like how everyone's related to everyone in some way, shape, or form, or like everyone knows everybody like 2 or 3 degrees removed, stuff like that. Um, and so then you start like knowing almost everybody in the world and then or being related to everybody in the world because you're using a really broad like spectrum of plant identification of plant traits. And then you get to be a little smaller because then you get a little more specific and a little more specific and a little more specific until you just get like sisters and brothers and your mom and your dad, and that's it. If that kind of makes sense on how this works. So this is like super, super duper duper great grandparents. Like this is how we're related. And up here is like, this is my sister. Say hi. We look alike. Whereas this is like, I see no resemblance at all here on the bottom. So let's talk about it. First, the Amaranthaceae is in the order of the Caryophyllaceae. There are 2 suborders, which I am going to not pronounce. They are in the Coreudiclots, which is a general gist of things, um, or like even bigger group of plants. They're often a rosette or an asterid sister. Um, they're the Caryophyllaceae have a distinctive trait of the beta-laning pigments, which is like that red color. They have a unique androecium and embryo structure. They have one-seeded fruit. They're adapted to arid and saline environments. They they have basal or free central plantation. What's that mean? All that is like all that fancy stuff basically means that they have specific plant structures that I learned about in this class, and it's very cool, but also I suck at memorizing, so it's kind of hard. Um, so they're essentially their reproductive structures have a very particular shape. They have a reddish pigment in some way, shape, or form, which is the betalanin. Um, and they're typically in arid and saline environments, so like more deserty type stuff. And then we jump into the suborder, which is the Caryophyllinae, maybe. There are 21 families in this. So it goes order, suborder, family, tribe, I think something else. This distinctive trait is a loss of the RPL2 intron in the cpDNA. I forget what that means. I'd have to Google it. Actually, I'll have to Google it. I have resources, so I have to look at my resources. Um, Again, they have the beta-alanine pigments, which is a classic trait of everything before this. They have a single whorl of tepals, free central basal plantation, opposite leaves, arid saline environments. So we're seeing some of the same traits pop up in the suborder, meaning that, which makes sense because these things are a little more closely related than the last group of things. As you can see by these photos, like they don't terribly look like super, super similar, but they look more similar than like this last one. And they have kind of a little more restrictive traits. So like single whorl, tepals, and opposite leaves. Tepals are like petals. It's a fancy word for like petals and leaves that look like petals. Finally, we get into the family, which is Amaranthaceae. There's 9 to 11 subfamilies. Again, their distinctive trait is the betalaine pigments. So that trait is what specifically separates them from the other families in this suborder. They have simple leaves. They have inconspicuous flowers and dense clusters. Their fruit is typically a utricle or an achene. They are adapted to arid and saline environments. So we are seeing a lot of the same. We have 2 of the same traits, betalaine pigments, arid and saline environments. And as you look more and more at these, they're going to look, these photos are going to look more and more similar, right? So the inconspicuous flowers and dense clusters. If you've ever seen amaranth, you've seen like these types of flowers. They're the really tiny ones that I used to like strip off the leaves or strip off the stems as a kid because I thought they were like cool and an interesting texture. Um, and then simple leaves. That just means that there's one leaf coming off one stem, and one leaf shape coming off one stem, essentially. And then we jump into a subfamily, which is now the suborder, subfamily. Those are things that are not quite a family, but still distinct enough that we can identify some traits that are not terribly, not like 100%, but like most of the time. So in the Chenopodioideae, we have 4 tribes and 26 genera. These have a distinctive trait of an herbaceous or fleshy perianth and tepals. So that is talking specifically about the flowers. So like these tiny little things on these little tiny flowers, our distinctive trait is talking about those what those little tiny flowers look like. Some other traits include that they're herbaceous, they have alternate, simple, stipulate leaves, they have conspicuous apetalous flowers in clusters, they're tepals, not petals. Superior ovary with single basal oval. Fruit is a utricle enclosed by the perianth, which is super nerdy stuff. Um, and so now we get into a tribe of the actual crop that we're talking about. So the Anseraceae has two genera, the Spinaceae and the Blytum. The distinctive trait for this tribe, and a tribe is like an even smaller grouping of a tribe is like your suborder, and order is like, or your family and subfamily is like your great grandparents and your like great uncle and your second and third cousin. Whereas your tribe is like your aunt, your uncle, your first cousins, your grandma, your grandpa, if that makes sense. Distinctive trait. Seeds lacking stalactites, which is tannin-like substances in the seed coat. Super nerdy. Traits. Alternate simple petiolate leaves, basal rosette, inconspicuous apetalous flowers in clusters, herbaceous fleshy perianth, superior ovary with single basal ovule. The fruit is a utricle enclosed in a perianth. So we're seeing, again, a lot of those same traits come up. And you'll notice that some of these traits that we are using as distinctive traits seem like they might be really hard to figure out. And that's because biologists, for the most part, have done a lot of research on what makes them different, which is why we had like that DNA thing a couple slides back, because people went through and figured out, was like, what the heck? And they figured it out for now. And those kinds of things change a lot. They talk about it and they change it and they adjust it as the research comes out. So, but as of this last spring, this is up to date. So then we go into genus. Now, your genus, you have 3 species in it, which is like a single person, I guess. A species, if we're talking about a species has like an entity, it's like one single person. So a genus would be like you, your siblings, or like you, your mom, and your dad, like you and your siblings specifically. Like this really tight knit group of folks that are like really like really similar on a DNA and biological level and have very, very similar traits, but are probably so everything in this genus has, very close biology, very close traits, things like that. And it's really easy to know what genus it's in because we're getting really specific and looking for um, very particular traits. Distinctively, though, what separates this genus from the other one? A dry, hard utricle with prickles or spines. Some other things that might be helpful in just identifying this genus would be glabrous, simple, alternate, petiolate leaves, entire or dentate leaf margins, and variable leaf shape, fleshy leaf texture, herb with erect stem and basal rosette. Now we can kind of see that here. The stem is very stiff and straight, and the the leaves kind of go around and around, whereas like this one, right, this bottom one, like that stem is not shaped, it's not pointed, that stem's not stiff. These could be like basal leaves, or a rosette, basically meaning that the leaves go around and around in a circle um, on the stem. So that brings us to what exactly are we talking about? We are talking about Spinaceae oleracea or Laceae, spinach. The stuff, it's one of my favorite, uh, like my favorite leafy green, one of my favorite vegetables. Um, and there's actually some really cool research on how spinach, because it's one of three species. I'm missing a slide. Hold on. I am missing a slide. Isn't it? Okay. So there are three species: spinach, Stachia tetranda, spinach tracea, Trixtentica, and spinach oleracea. So these are all in bloom. And this last one, which is actually spinach on the far right hand side, that is the only one that has been domesticated. The other two have not. And so agriculturists have done some fun, funky, fresh, super cool stuff with that. Um, and yeah, you should read into it if you're a nerd like me and want to know more. If you want to know more about this, drop it in the comments, do all the things, and I will get back to you. So if you want to hear more of these things, it does take me quite a long time to do this specifically in this format because I did lots and lots of research, as you can see. I'll show you my works cited. I read through lots of research articles, and these are the only ones that I really used for the information in the slides. Um, but I can do it again. And I can also talk about other things like my experience in that class and how exactly plant taxonomy works and things like that. So yeah, just give me some information. Let me know and tell me how you like it. I hope you've had a lovely day and learned something with me, and I will talk to you next week. Have a great day.